Right, so I wanted to show you guys how to make Vietnamese coffee. It's one of my favorite things growing up eating is dipping the Chinese crullers into the coffee, and you're making iced Vietnamese coffee. You can have it hot as well, and if you go into a Vietnamese restaurant, this is typically the setup that you see. You see a filter, right, with the filter plate right here, and it's kind of, it's perforated. It's also perforated in here, so you get like that double filter system. And then you also have this right here, the press to press down the coffee, and then also the lid, right? And so what they typically do is add in some condensed milk on the bottom. How I did it at my parents' restaurant, it was literally, if I can try to remember, it's all kind of by hand, by memory as I'm doing it here. So it was about 2 heaping tablespoons of condensed milk. There's a lot of condensed milk in it. I know, it's kind of crazy. So it's a little bit less than what I remember. So it's gonna be 2.5 tablespoons, okay? And so after you do 2.5 tablespoons, you have your coffee filter. You wanna put it right on top. It's all for individual serving. And you always want to use a very deep dark roast. Typically for Vietnamese coffee, you can do the Café du Monde, or you can do like the French market one right here. The reason why we like to use the New Orleans style is because there's a chicory added to it, and that chicory really gives it that nice smokiness that Vietnamese coffee needs. And so I usually do in this filter for an individual serving about 1 tablespoon, 2 tablespoons, and 1/2. So both of it, 2.5 tablespoons of condensed milk, 2.5 tablespoons of the Vietnamese coffee. Then you want to take the press, you want to put the press in, so that's how it looks right now. You want to put the press in, level it out, and the first thing you want to do is add in a little bit of hot water just to bloom the coffee grounds first. And just let that sit, and then it's going to actually start blooming the coffee grounds. And we're gonna let that sit for a little bit with the lid on so we don't lose that beautiful floral note from the coffee. All right, you can actually tell that it's bloomed after you see the water filtering through a little bit, right? And so now you wanna pour the rest of the hot water all the way to the top. It's not really measured by cup, but it's more measured by the film. So you just added some water in to bloom the coffee, and you kind of see it dripping through. Now you're gonna add the coffee, fill it all the way to the rim, leave it, and then cover it, and then you're going to actually start seeing all that coffee filtering through. And after it filters through, we're going to do another half of the film, or of the filter, and we're going to fill it up halfway through with water again, and then that should be the perfect amount of coffee for your Vietnamese coffee. All right, now that that first part is filtered through, you can still see it's dripping, but when I open it, I barely see any water anymore. And so this is a good time for me to fill it halfway up and then stop from there. And then now just let it filter through again. And then that should be enough for 1 glass of Vietnamese coffee. All right, now that it's done filtering through, you can see how it's all finished dripping through, right? You use this lid right here. You put it down, and this is where you want to actually lift your filter right onto that lid so that it can catch any leftover coffee that may still be dripping. At this point, we got this gorgeous Vietnamese coffee, and so usually when they drink it hot, right, they just have it like this. You mix it all up, and you get your Vietnamese coffee with the condensed milk mixing in, and then the hot coffee helps dissolve all of that condensed milk. However, a lot of times you like to just leave it before mixing it, right? Let's say you want iced coffee and you want it to be very, very creamy. You don't even have to mix this up yet. You could have left it separated with the coffee there, with the coffee up here, and then the condensed milk separated, and covered this cup and put it into the fridge. Let the coffee get cold and let the condensed milk thicken up and get cold as well. And tomorrow morning, or maybe 5 hours from now, you mix it up and you get much more of a creamy texture, partly because the coffee is cold and the condensed milk is cold, and it creates that much better creamy type of texture that you're looking for. Sometimes, drink it hot like this, you just drink it right on the spot. But to have it cold while it's still hot like this, you can also still add ice. But if there's a trick that you want to know on how to keep it creamy and have more of a creamy texture, you put the whole thing into the fridge before adding ice to it and before even mixing it up. You want to keep it separated, refrigerate it, and then you mix it up. But I have it hot right now, and this is usually how they serve it for you in the restaurant, where it's nice and hot. You mix it up really nicely. Make sure all that condensed milk is mixed in. And while it's still hot, you add some ice. And this is why it doesn't get as creamy, because the ice that you're gonna add in is gonna also dissolve into the coffee, which kind of dilutes it a little bit. Whereas if your coffee was cold and your condensed milk was cold and then you mix it up and then added ice, then it gets much more of a creamy texture. But since we're doing it for the video right now, I wanna go ahead and make the iced coffee ready to drink right immediately. Vietnamese coffee is very, very strong. It has a very strong bitterness to it, but it also has a very light, a really nice sweetness to it because of the condensed milk. And after you mix it, it should be ready to go. And part of why I wanted to make this was because I love pairing it with the Chinese crullers. Part of what I did growing up with my parents is that when we made these Chinese crullers, here's the finished product of the Chinese crullers. When it first comes out of the fryer, it's like really hard and outside. But once you let all that oil drain and you let it cool, this is where we put that, the divot from the skewer earlier, and it's created so that you can tear it apart. And so in Vietnam, we always tear it apart like this. It's like a breakfast donut. And because crullers, Chinese crullers don't really have much flavor to them, you know, we usually eat them with porridge. We usually cut them into little pieces and have it added into porridge, and you can see the beautiful texture there. Light and fluffy. Let's see, it's kind of blurry. Okay. Yeah. So it has like that really nice texture, pulling apart. And then, so usually we eat it with porridge if you want to use it in a savory way. But to have it in a sweet way, we love to take the crullers and dip it right into the coffee and then eat it. It's really good. And it ends up soaking up all that coffee, and this is kind of like a morning breakfast thing that my family loved doing growing up. And they still do that nowadays. But the coffee itself is really good. Sorry, I'm like chewing as I'm eating, or chewing as I'm talking. But when I drink it, it's super good. Has a really nice chicory flavor to it. But you can make it directly like cold as soon as you make it and it's like still hot, it's okay. You can still add ice to it and drink it almost immediately. It kind of dilutes it a little bit because for some people it might be too strong. You probably prefer adding ice in even when it's hot. And so if you want more of a creaminess from it, then just remember, put it into the fridge before mixing it up and then adding ice into it, okay? So good. It's so good. Well, I hope you enjoyed my video. I wanted to show you the crullers again. Look how cool they look. And I did tear them apart earlier. And just beautiful texture. And there, I had a version of this in Spain that I forgot to mention to you guys. They did little smaller like versions of it. And they didn't really do like that skewer thing. They just like cut the dough up and they rolled out the dough very thin. And then they just like fried it into strips and it created these little crullers right here. And then they just finished it off with powdered sugar instead of the cinnamon sugar. It was the churros that they made with cinnamon sugar. So I made all my churros here. And this also turned out fantastic. And it's gonna be really good with my Vietnamese coffee. Yum. Not sure you can see it. It's always so hard to get the focus. It's not gonna work. There we go. Beautifully fried. Nice and golden, crispy, but also fried through the center. Maybe that was a bad way of doing it. Let's see. Maybe I can tear it up a little bit better to show the interior. There we go. I hope you enjoyed the video. As always, I get to reap the benefits of making all these videos by getting to eat all these yummy treats all by myself. But again, I'll include in the recipe for these crullers into the description of the YouTube video, okay? And if you have any questions or any more further questions in terms of how to make these Chinese crullers, you definitely have my number, and I am always available to answer your messages and questions.